Welcome to Glass in Session. I'm your host, Val. Thank you for joining me. As you may or may not realize, this entire season, we're focused on wine regions that have something to do with the lake. They're usually right up against the lake, and the lake has something to do with the wine in terms of how the grapes are grown, the weather, and the wine styles resulting thereof. So the lake we are focusing on today is responsible for quite a few appellations of red, white, rosé wines, even sparkling wines, dessert-style wines, all the styles of wines. And it is another one of those absolutely gorgeous places I never wanted to leave. Vineyards of red and white grapes, many we know and love, some perhaps a little less known, surround most of the lake. And the same applies to the appellations. Some we know and love. I'm particularly fond of Bardolino, which is in my glass right now, and others as well, but some I keep forgetting about yet. When they end up at my glass, either at an event or when I see them on the wine list or in somebody's winogram or winestagram or whatever they call it, I can't help but smile. And I think more of this. And by more of this week, I want to offer you a taste of these regions that may not jump off the shelf at your local wine purveyor's establishment and into your basket. They may be what the trade refers to often as hand sells, meaning your wine store owner or employees or some distributor that's knowledgeable, a rep or whatever, trolling the aisles, may have to guide you to these shelves and introduce you to the bitchin' juice that's in this particular bottle and why it's dope AF and why it should be in your cart and later in your glass. So how to best tackle this assortment, this mixed case of Vino Italiano this week? We're going to start with the where. A little bit about Lago di Garda itself, or Lake Garda. I'm going to go back and forth between the Italian word and the English Lake Garda, just because that's how we do. And we're going to travel clockwise. We're going to start with the town of Garda and the appellation of Bardolino. Appellations of Bardolino. See, plural. I know you're getting excited. I am. Our cork-dorkalicious journey is going to take us south to Bianco di Castosa, west to Garda Colli Mantovani, north to Lugana and San Martino della Battaglia, and along the stretch of the west coast, almost the length of the lake northward, we have the Riviera di Garda Classico, and right at the top we have Trentino Alto Adige. You're going to meet some groups, appellations, and most certainly we'll have some fun with history and culture along the way, because that's, again, how we do. And by the end of the episode, I hope you can picture yourself in at least one of these places, sipping something new and fascinating to you, staring out over Lago di Garda as I once did, wondering, why would I ever leave this place? So we're going to start by pointing out where Lake Garda, Italy's largest lake, is. In fact, only Lake Geneva and Lake Constance are larger if we're talking alpine lakes. Now, we've talked about Lake Geneva before in the Swiss wine episode. We haven't focused specifically on the lake, but it's very prominent to some of the wine regions around that lake as well. When we talked about Lake Constance, I believe in the last episode, and I'll link both of those up for you to revisit. Lake Garda is up to 1,135 feet deep in some areas and 34 miles long, and in some places up to 11 miles wide. And because of the beautiful weather here, as a result of a climate more on the Mediterranean side, we can imagine why this area is so rich with not only grapevines, but also olives and fruit and other warm weather flora such as oleander and even palm trees. And why is it not more popular? Well, if you are like me and don't like visiting any part of Europe when there are hordes of tourists around, you'll be glad it's not more popular. But we're at not the confluence of three countries, as we were in the last episode where Lake Constance is concerned, but at the confluence of three of Italy's larger wine regions where they come together around Lake Garda's 143 square miles of surface area. Veneto, like I said, to the east and the southeast, Lombardia to the southwest and west, and Trentino Alto Adige right at the tippy top, just kissing the top of the lake. So, for a little history, let's pop back in time. Let's pop way back in time to about 1.5 million years ago, where, just like all the lakes we've covered this season, were formed by glacier activity. That's right, a huge glacier just barged its way into the base of the mountains and said, hey, good place to melt, right? And voila, or eccola, Italy's biggest lake was formed. And were there Romans stomping around in this area, as in other regions in Europe where grapevines exist today? Yes, there were. About 300 BC or so, we had Romans. They were doing their things with the vines, as they always do. There were also other various tribes that would battle over this land in centuries to come. the Lombards, the Franks, and yada, 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 wars, mine, swinging whatever around to see who's more powerful, and yay, mine, whatever they do. Until the 9th century, that's when Charlemagne rolled up onto the area and called dibs on the lake. Lago di Garda before that was referred to as Lacus Benakis in the literary works of the likes of Virgil and Horace. And if that's not proper Latin pronunciation, I apologize. Forbo didn't have it, and I really didn't want to research it that much. So Lacus, Benacus, it doesn't matter now because now it's Lago di Garda. The nearby lands saw a lot of conflict, however, in the 19th and 20th centuries as well. Thinking of the 1859 Battle of Solferino between the Austrians, French, and Italians, the Austrians lost that one, and about 25,000 soldiers total died during this battle, after which another battle started when the Italians weren't quite happy with the restrictions imposed upon them by the Treaty of Villafranca. Then this battle went on for another 7 years until the unification. But for a large part of human history, the northern section of the lake was Austrian turf until after World War I. By World War II, Lago di Garda was a hotbed of fascist activity. Fun fact, or not so fun fact, giving today's historic echoes, this is near where Mussolini later would be caught while trying to escape and executed toward the end of the war. And if you've not read about his execution, it is a fun read, including where they stuffed mice in his mouth. I thought it was funny as heck. So, fun, let's get back to the wine. We're going to start with the 3 wine regions, the first one being in Veneto. Now, I've waxed, and I want to say poetically, but the poetic words were not my own, but those of Roman statesman Cassiodorus in the 6th century on the Recioto wines of Valpolicella, being, quote, drinkable purple of astonishing delightfulness. Yeah, I linked that episode up in case you want to revisit and learn what Ernest Hemingway also had to do with the wines of this region. So yes, Valpolicella is part of the Veneto. But today, the drinkable red and vibrant pink of astonishing deliciousness we're going to be talking about is in Bardolino, which I touched on way back in a Rosato episode, also linked, way back in season 1. This appellation caught my attention on a warm, perfectly autumnal day in 2010 over a plate of Vitello Tonnato at a favorite wine bar when I was in Florence. I've been in love with this, especially the Rosato wines or the Chiaretto wines, ever since. The appellation of Bardolino has been a DOC, Denominazione Origini Controllata, since 1968. You may want to settle in as I read you the long, long list of grape varieties that comprise this wine. Just kidding, I'm not going to do that to you. Pretty much the same as Valpolicella Corvina, because anywhere from 35 to 95%, what the hell, for reds, rosé or rosato, and sparkling rosé wines is pretty standard. You can have up to 20% Corvinone in the primary blend, anywhere from 5 to 40% Rondinella, and up to 15% Molinari, and up to 10% of any other single recognized grape varieties of the red color, but up to 20% of a blend of those other authorized red grapes. And I'm not going to do this to you, to all the appellations, because you can easily get that in the links that I'm going to provide for you in the show notes. And I'm trying to make this easy to listen to. So bam, that's Bardolino. That's what I'm drinking right now. I'm drinking a red, not a Chiaretto, which I really, really love. And as of 2022, there are over 6,000 acres belonging to this appellation. That's a lot of red grapes, my friend. And in my opinion, quaffable deliciousness. As I said, all red wines are made here, but their unique thing is really the dark cherry red Rosati or Chiaretto, which comes in a sparkling version, which I have never had and want. That is in all caps, per favore, please. These sparkling or spumanti come in all styles, very dry, brut nature to all the way to the demi-sec, as they call avocado. The alcohol is not too high on these wines, as the minimum ABV is 10.5% for the Chiaretto, Rosso, and Rosso from the Classico zone. Sparkling or spumante is going to be about 11.5% alcohol. And they make a Novello, which, as you may or may not remember from way back in season 2, where I explain how, Italy's Nouveau wines are called Vini Novelli, and they are actually beating France's Beaujolais Nouveau to the market by weeks. Yes, linked. Minimum ABV for Novello, 11%. Anywho, seek out the Novello from this region if you can find it. It's only served a specific time of year around the holidays. Serve it with roasted chestnuts or castagne, the end. Wait, not the end. I see here on Italian Wine Central, which is an excellent website if you love you some Italian wines, that in 2020, Bardolino added 3 subzones of La Rocca, Montebaldo, and Somma Campagna, all Rosso, Reds from these 3 subzones must be aged for at least 1 year, and their minimum ABV is 11%. I've never seen one in the market. You might have. The Bardolino Superiore DOCG appellation is the only DOCG I believe that we're talking about today. If I find another one as we go, I will make that connection. So Bardolino Superiore DOCG is, again, the same red grapes, a little different blending percentages, and only a little over 100 acres in this growing area for said grapes. And what makes this Superiore DOCG is that these will only be still red wines from a handful of specified communes and a higher minimum alcohol, which is normal. When you see Superiore on a label, that usually means a higher minimum alcohol versus the 10% of the Bardolino. Superiore is 12%. Also, minimum aging is 1 year for Superiore. A lot of times when you see Superiore, you can have extra aging. It often means higher alcohol, and Reserva often means extra aging. But again, depends on the region and the rules for producing wine in that region. The wine region directly south of my beloved Bardolino and Bardolino Superiore is all white. This is Bianco di Custosa, DOC, where we find still whites, sparkling, and oh, hello, Pasito wines. And I'll link up that episode too if you want to revisit the Wine with Dried Grapes episode. That is a fun one. Grapes ruling this 3,000 plus acres of vineyards are the Cortese, which is the main grape, pretty much 70% minimum across the board for all styles, followed by a host of local and international whites, including the Garganega, no more than 45% of this alone, or with Trebbiano Toscano or the Friulano. And no more than 30% of these rascals, Malvasia, Pinot Bianco, Riesling, Chardonnay, and Welsh Riesling. There are Superiore and Reserve versions of the still whites. Remember, ABV is usually higher for Superiore, and the aging is usually longer for the Reserva. I think I already said that by law, but in case you missed it, there it is again. And that takes care of, I know, quite top level, the Veneto selections on the eastern side of Lake Garda. Now, that didn't hurt too bad, did it? Oh, well, actually, it doesn't take care of the Veneto selections, because there's a cool appellation here that I always think of as a Veneto appellation. But the 6,000 acres are in both Veneto and Lombardia, and this is Lugana DOC. It's not so small. It was established in 1967, and there are almost 6,400 acres of vines, all white wines. Trebbiano is the star player here, the star grape, and we all know it in other parts of Italy as Verdicchio, especially on the coast. Still and sparkling wines, as well as late harvest white wines, are all made here and must have at least 90% of this here Trebbiano, aka Verdicchio, or Trebbiano di Soave, or Trebbiano di Lugana. Call it whatever you want, but don't call me late for 0 wine 30 when Lugana is in my glass. That is one that's getting a little more popular. You might see a little more often. Definitely look for that wine. As we round the south bend of the lake and gaze toward Solferino from the Lugana vineyards, we're going to find ourselves in the Lombardia region of Gardi Colli Mantovani, another DOC since 1976. All the styles are made here, with just under 50 acres of grapes. Reds from international varieties like our Bordeaux friends, the Cabs, Franc, and Sauvignon Merlot. And yes, Carmenere shows up here too, as well as the Rondinella of aforementioned Veneto. Whites, hello Chardonnay, Trebbiano, Garganega of Soave fame. That's where you've heard of that one before, in case you're wondering. The Rosato or Chiaretto styles, as well as dessert styles, both laced harvest and Pasito, are made here. But as we head north and cross back through Lugana, we're going to find ourselves also bumping into a small couple of chunks of vines where Friulano is the grape, and white wines made from it dominated this appellation, a DOC since 1970. Frankly, I've not paid a lot of attention to it, but if it's that obscure, it now has my attention via this silly podcast. Only 40 acres or so of vines here produce about 5,000 cases a year. I mean, there are some wineries that produce way more than that. So these are still white wines, and something very cool they have here is a fortified sweet wine called a Licoroso with a minimum of 15% potential ABV and a minimum residual sugar of 40 grams per liter. No aging requirements. Just get right into my glass. Thank you. Stumbling northward up the west coast of Lago di Garda, we are in Riviera del Garda DOC. This is a cool 1,000-acre appellation that's been around since 1977 that makes red and rosato wines, including the Chiaretto, with at least 30% Gropello. Gro what? Who? New grape? Who this? It's time for a grape gab, which is going to descend quickly into a Hashtag Corkdorkalicious Feast of Grape Geekery. So let's do this. Actually, Gropello, there are 3 different ones. Take your pick, mix and match. Gropello di Mocazzina is not the same as Gropello Gentile, but is believed to be the same as Gropello di San Stefano. You see, the granddaddy of the Gropello varieties, or Gropelli, if you will, is believed to be the Gropello Gentile. There is written evidence of this existence in northern Italy and of it being sent to Germany in the late 1500s. Although the Gropello di Mocazzina and the Gropello Gentile are usually just blended, often with Marzemino and Barbera and what the hell, some Sangiovese or whatever other red grapes are authorized in this region, but no more than 10% of any of them are Bordeaux varieties. But the main grapes, which I've been known to call gropes by mistake in the past. And by the way, I would be totally justified in doing so today because we're talking about Gropello and the red wines made from them, which can be arranged from light to full-bodied style, very aromatic when young. Again, depends on the blend, depends on the winemaker. But the Gropelli that I just mentioned are not to be confused with the other Gropello, Gropello di Revo, which is believed to be a descendant from an ancient white Swiss grape called Ureze, and that is used to make wines in the Val di Non further in Trentino. And speaking of, Trentino Alto Adige. The wine regions in Trentino Alto Adige that are actually closer to Lake Garda are, well, let's just start with Trentino Alto Adige. It's got 2, let's just say zones. The Trentino part further south and the Alto Adige region part, aka Südtirol, aka South Tyrol, which is hugging the Austrian border. It's really just the northern tip of the lake that slips up into the more southerly of the 2 zones, Trentino Doc, that we will concern ourselves with, although I find the wines and the stunning mountainous regions of both zones worthy of their own episodes. This is a part of Italy that wasn't really a part of Italy, if you think about it, until 1919, when Austria finally gave it up after bogarting it for about 600 years, and the history is fascinating. And I should note that this part of Italy is not only known for being 99% mountains. That's some fun grape growing, but the local language is not just Italian, it's also German. So you'll see all the road signs in both languages and often on the wine labels. Trentino DOC, DOC, is its own appellation since 1971. Again, the main wine region kissing the nose of Lake Garda, right at the northern end. And it is known for producing more DOC level wines than anywhere else in Italy. Why is this interesting? Because I just mentioned that we're in Alps territory where only 15% of the land is even amenable to farming, and only 5% of that is under 1,640 feet or 500 meters in elevation. So the soil's going to be rocky and it's going to be some rough farming there, but yet more DOC level wine than any other region in Italy. So that was interesting. I found within also the Trento DOC, there are about a half a dozen or so other DOCs like Trentino Superiore and subzones which make whites and reds, rosés, late harvest, Licoroso, Passito wines from more grapes than I have time to list, and that you'll have the patience probably to hear me rattle off, which is why, again, Trentino Alto Adige deserves another couple of episodes, really. We're dealing with altitude, alpine conditions, and in Trentino, some moderating influence from Lake Garda combined with a more Mediterranean climate from the south. And what does this mean? All the grapes, people, all the grapes. From the aromatic Riesling and Gewürztraminer to the full-bodied Cabernets and Lagrein. Lagrein, another new grape who dis? Yes, dis, along with Teraldigo, Lagrein's daddy, makes up some of the region's signature reds. There are also light-bodied reds from Schiava and Marzemino. And Marzemino I mentioned earlier, that's the one we blend with Gropello. So those are popular in neighboring Lombardia, where we just left. And a sparkling wine of which you should partake is Trento DOC. That's how they say it. They say Trento DOC. It's Trento DOC, split out into its own DOC in 1993, and shall thusly be split into its own episode in probably 2026, if not later in 2025, if we're still around pending some other disaster, which is becoming more likely by the day here in the U.S. of WTF. So bringing it home to Lago di Garda, which is where I'd rather be right now, sipping my way along the coastline from Bardolino and Custoza and around the south to Colli Montevani, around the bend, and head north along the coast through Lugana for some kick-ass whites, grop some Gropello along the Riviera del Garda Classico, and disappear into Trentino for some aromatic whites made with a grape that only belongs here, and some fizz from Trento DOC. And I think a fizz is a great place to leave it for now. I thank you for clicking play on this latest lake episode. We got one left of this season, and I'm taking a month off, and I'll be back in May. I thank you for subscribing. I thank you for keeping a spot open for me in your podcast feed and sailing along with me during this season of exploring wines from regions where lakes play a role in viticulture and winemaking nearby. And for the last episode, we're going to head to another continent and see what there is to sip lakeside. I hope you'll join me. Until then, you can always reach out to me via email, val@glassandsession.com, or on the socials. Pick your poison, Blue Sky @GlassandSession. Vino with Val on Threads and Instagram. You will see Glass in Session in my bio. I'm on Spoutable, Glass in Session, Vino with Val on Pinterest, and on Facebook /Glass in Session. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Valerie Caruso, DWS, CWE, FWS, Letters, Wine Stuff, and audiobook narrator, which reminds me, you can find this podcast and the latest audiobooks I've narrated on Audible. Smokey, the podcast, Smokerdoodles, is on Nebelung_smoke_show on Instagram. There is Glass in Session and yes, podcast swag in my TeePublic store, linked way at the bottom of my show notes and on my websites. And since I'm not reading ads for press-on nails, underwear, or supplements, please get yourself some swag. It's a small way to support the Winecast. And for those of you already scoring yourself some swag, thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. My accountant appreciates it. There are always sales on the site, so please keep a lookout for those too. Glass in Session is a production and registered trademark of Vino With Val, LLC. Music is Write Your Story by Joy Stock. Website is glassandsession.com/podcast.